we could reach the point where everybody agrees global warming is happening, and works night and day to protect Earth from the results of it. And while we're doing that, we could get hit by asteroids, or some cache of nuclear weapons gets discovered and is either used by rather apocalyptic terrorist groups, or just goes off accidentally, which is probably the more likely scenario. And then we have that. Plagues can happen at any moment. Germs are constantly mutating and changing. The amazing thing to me, and I ended the show last week with this, and I think it's something that, as from a spiritual perspective, and if you are a spiritual person, and even if you're not a spiritual person, you should really think about the fact that every day stuff could go wrong that would completely end us. The planet, humanity, everything. Every day. Every day, many times a day. Things could happen that completely annihilate us. All it would take is one little accident, one little thing here, one little thing there. And as we grow and become more complex, the more those chances increase. And yet, it never happens. It never happens. Now you can say, well, we have good protocols in place for emergencies and things like that, and of course we do, but we're never completely prepared. And in fact, I would venture to say our level of preparedness for these things is maybe not as great as we might think. I personally think there's something else going on. Right? I mean, when you think about the many, many things every day that could happen that would completely take us out, and they don't happen. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it seems like there's something going on. Something looking out for us. Something that is beyond all of those scary, scary scenarios. That is creating our story. And if you follow the clues, and this goes back to what I said at the beginning of the show, you'll see that something is us at a higher level, at the highest level of our being. At that metaphysical level, at that level of oneness. We're creating it all. And we're even creating the challenging virtue, climate change and new planets and all of those kinds of things. And frankly, the way that technology is, increasing with the efforts of people like Elon Musk and other private companies, along with NASA, developing technology to take us into space, and with the discovery, which I mentioned last week, of 7 habitable or presumed to be habitable planets that aren't all that far away from us. It's not such a bizarre scenario. It's not such a sci-fi kind of thing to think about. You got to remember, everything was science fiction before it became a reality. I'll give you the great example. If you have watched Star Trek at all, and any one of the ideations of Star Trek, but let's start with the original. There's a massive computer on board the spaceship Enterprise, and you can ask that computer anything, and it will instantly give you that information. And you can ask it verbally, and it will talk back to you. Now, that's what Gene Roddenberry created in 1966. Now, here we are, 50 years later, and we have computers that connect to the internet. This huge brain, we can ask anything and get information back in a second. We can access the internet. We can talk to the internet, the giant computer. We can talk to it on our cell phone and find out information. That was so far out of the realm of possibility in 1966 that it was fantasy, science fiction, and now it is our reality. And you can look at Star Trek, and you'll be amazed. And there's been a number of documentaries on how much of our technology was foreseen by Star Trek, either foreseen or inspired by Star Trek. Because don't forget, a generation of engineers and science geeks and techie types grew up watching Star Trek, grew up wanting there to be things like phasers and tricorders. And those childhood dreams, those motivations certainly stay with you and inspire you to create that kind of technology. And as we see how rapidly technology is advancing, I honestly don't think we'll have much trouble meeting that 100-year deadline that Mr. Hawking is talking about. But anyway, I wanted to talk about global warming in particular with this, because there are some, very well worked out kind of milestones, tipping points, if you will, that we will probably be encountering in one way or another over the next few years. So one of the main milestone years that they're talking about is 2020. Now, 2020 might sound like the future, but keep in mind it's only 3 years away. Less than 3 years away. They're predicting that there will be major heat waves beginning in 2020 and lasting at least 9 years over areas of the western and central U.S. They'll be exceptionally long, and they may render those areas, particularly in the Midwest, may put them into permanent drought conditions. Permanent drought conditions. That means that food that we get from those areas, from the farms in those areas, might no longer be available to us. And it shows, and I won't go too far into it, but it shows the number of extremely hot seasons per decade. And it shows 2010 to 2019. Basically, about 3 extremely hot seasons per decade are expected in that area that I was talking about, the South and the Midwest. and the southern Midwest. Now looking at 20 to 2029, the next 9-year period, they are predicting upwards of 7 extremely hot seasons per decade. That's almost every year in the decade in those areas. So that's one thing to be aware of. Another climate change tipping point in 2020 is when is the time frame between 2020 and 2030 when it's projected that irreversible releases of large volumes of greenhouse gases will be coming up from the melting permafrost. And that permafrost, of course, is that region of the Arctic that we know is melting because of the warming of the atmosphere. And there's a study into the speed at which the permafrost is melting, and it suggests that the tipping point will occur between 2020 and 2030, and this will be the point at which the Arctic turns from being what they call a net sink for carbon dioxide into an overall source that will accelerate global warming because of the release of those greenhouse gases. Once the frozen carbon thaws out and decays, there's no way to put it back into the permafrost, according to Dr. Kevin Schaefer of the U.S. National Snow and Ice Data Center in Boulder, Colorado. So we've got that. Now, greenhouse gas emissions are expected to or need to peak by 2020 at the latest. And there's no consensus on what's considered a safe level of warming. But basically, everybody seems to be trying to limit it to 2 degrees Celsius of global emissions of greenhouse gases. Now, the IPCC, that's the organization that is working with governments around the world on climate change and global greenhouse gas emissions, says that they must be brought down by 2020 in order to keep global temperatures from exceeding plus 2 degrees Celsius. And that the carbon emissions growth must begin to decline by 3% per year after that 2020 date. Now, and this may be part of Dr. Stephen Hawking's calculations, given the fact that we have a United States president and an administration that still is quite skeptical about climate change, is planning on pulling out of our previous agreements on bringing down greenhouse gases. And if that happens, if we don't follow through on what most people are saying is the best way to proceed, if we don't begin to decline by 3% per year after 2020 to stabilize the climate, then we will see impacts that could be quite devastating. A lot of people, and the reason why they call it climate change now, and as opposed to global warming, is because a lot of people, when they hear global warming, they're thinking, well, things are getting hot. But not everywhere. What it means is, while the atmosphere above us is warming, that creates shifts in temperature or precipitation. So some places will have severe flooding, and some places will have droughts. And it actually changes what is normal temperatures for a particular region. So regions